All right, this is One Last Midnight. Welcome back to another episode of Astroneer. About 2 weeks ago, Astroneer had a new update called the Controls Update. And as you might expect, the update focused mainly on controls. So the menu has been separated into tabs for the keyboard and the mouse. The player is now able to remap their inputs in the control setting tab. Mouse and keyboard support has been added for Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo Switch. It supports remapping of the extra mouse buttons have also been added. Players can control the virtual cursor with a toggle, and players on mouse and keyboard can now set the camera orbit function to a toggle as well. And this was the main focus of the update. Now there was also some additional changes. There were some audio improvements that was made to the T1 oxygenator on the player's backpack. There were some camera improvements. So the camera is now changed for when you're in tight spaces, and it intelligently responds to when you're going up and down, as well as the camera will no longer lose sight of the player when moving at high speeds. Some also general tuning of the camera. There were some drill improvements that were made to the UI. So it now actually represents the angle of the drill. And the rover will maintain a steady speed while you're drilling, so it will no longer speed up as you're going downhill, which would outpace the drill. The drill has been clamped down to a maximum upward and downward, so you can no longer get vertical, wind up flipping over or losing traction. Also, lastly, if the drill is pointed to upwards or to downwards, it will automatically shut off, restricting you from, having that vertical downward drop. Now, I tested the drill out extensively on the live stream, and I'll be a little honest with you, it's very different from what it was previously. At least for me, I found a really hard time controlling it, and I'm sure it'll just take some time to get used to the new control of the drill, but it seemed a little bit too sticky, if that makes sense to you, in moving the drill head up and down. So for you players that have played in the past, it was kind of you just tilted your camera angle up and your drill started drilling up. It seemed like there's more of a delay, and there's this kind of a, like I said, sticky feeling to it. Only time will tell to see if these drill improvements are really good. I don't spend a lot of time on the drill, so it's maybe going to take some practice for me to get used to it, but we'll see in the future. There was a big change to the landing zone improvements, which I really like. Now you can really see the landing zones and get an understanding of where you're going to land and how you're going to land. And there's some new icons that are showing up when you're landing. Landing zones that are created by players, like landing pads, now have unique icons, and they're a cylindrical shape. Landing zones now have this animated visual added to it so that it's easy to identify where you're going to be landing. There was some change to resource bytes and composite materials, and actually all researchable resources. Now they've had their research time changed to 5 minutes, and their byte values have been adjusted accordingly. So don't think you're going to get rich off of bytes by doing resources. It is a way to get research bytes, but, honestly, there's much better ways to get research bytes. There are some new store bundles if you guys are into getting cosmetics from the store, so those are interesting to check out. As well as they brought back the salvage initiative, and you're able to get the salvage throwback, which contains a palette called Going Green and a hat called Wired. The new items are a cone hat at 4,200 points, an emote stop sign at 8,000 points, and a palette safety orange at 14,000 points. One of the things that was not talked about in the patch notes is that the balls, the zebra ball, the checker ball, the cow pattern ball, now have lore associated to them. So as you hover over them, you can see the lore that talks about each one of these balls. They also now have their names as well. On top of that, they have a little interactive ability. So if you interact with these, they open up a gateway and the ball transports, and there's a chance for you to get a different variation of the ball. On top of that, they've added 2 new balls. They've added Lord Dragon and Lord Hypno as part of the ball collection. Now the lore and the kind of stipulates that, they were being used for some sort of experimentation. I don't know if they're going to go any farther with this lore or if they just decided to add something to it, because there's always been a question of what were these there for. And if you played the pre-alpha, you know that they were there just as a development tool for the developers to understand how their terrain is going, how lighting is going, so on and so forth. So it's an artifact that was left in since pre-alpha because people loved it so much. But now they've given it a little bit of lore and kind of explained exactly, well, not exactly, but explained what these things are in a game-related sense. In other news for Astroneer, Joe has put out an article about Astroneer by the Numbers, and it gives a breakdown on all the numbers associated with Astroneer. It talks about how many players have played Astroneer, how many peak monthly players, how many average monthly players, as well as the peak connected concurrent players and their peak daily players. They talk about how many items have been printed in the game, how many tethers have been made, how many resources, how many rovers have been created, as well as how many millions of new saves have been made, and their reviews on Steam. Also, the average meridian of time played. What's interesting is they also talk about their revenue and their sales, which is really cool. And Astroneer has done very well. It's sold over 3 million units, very close to 4 million units, with a gross revenue of about 75 million. In addition to other sales and revenue numbers that I find just completely fascinating, just from a perspective insight on how well video games do. There's some regional and platform data inside of this document as well. There's also some development data that they've had in there. They've been developing this game for 92 months, which is a really long time. They talk about their versions, how many versions they put out, updates they put out, and how many game awards they've made. And then they also talk about their development team, where they started with 5 people and now they're at 40 people, with also some other information in there as well. I want to thank the System Error team, Joe, specifically for working on this document and giving us this transparency. Joe stated they were inspired by Us 2 games for being the pioneers in this type of transparency. And if you go look at Plus 2, they've got their breakdowns on their game Monument Valley, where you can see all their sales and all their metrics related to the game. I found this information just really fascinating, just from a business perspective, just to see how well video games do. And if you're ever interested in trying to make a video game, what you can possibly make out of it. I mean, they had a wildly successful story. Doesn't mean if you're a video game developer or emerging video game developer, you're going to have a wildly successful story, but you kind of get an idea of what's going on. Read the entire article because it gets into some more depth on some of their numbers, and especially the revenue numbers, because even though it says they've made $75 million, you know, you're not taking into account to other things that are associated with the business, which is they have to give cuts to each of these platforms on top of their business costs. And so that's not net profit, that's gross profit. On April 1st, Joe posted on Twitter a picture of a screenshot. Now, I don't know, you know, it's April 1st, right? So is this a joke? Is this not a joke? It does say we don't have any jokes today, just this image of a real thing coming in a big future update. And he's asking, can you figure out what it is? And again, it's April. He did it on April 1st. So is the joke that he did it on April 1st and he's messing with your head? Or is it a fake thing? Or is it really, really a real thing? I don't know. To me, it looks like a donut maker. You know, it doesn't really, but it does kind of look like a donut maker. There's a big giant donut in the middle. There's these little donut dispensers off on the side. And so my guess is this is the Astroneer donut maker. So just to kind of wrap this up, this update was really heavily focused on controls. I mean, it was a very content light update, like the last couple updates that were just kind of content light. I mean, the Galastropods was a nice lore introduction. There was probably about 12 hours worth of gameplay there if you went down and did the missions. And so that was a nice little addition to the game. And actually, the Galastropods, or the snails, the space snails, are extremely OP. They're really cool objects to get. So if you haven't gotten them, go get them because they're a lot of fun. But for the perspective of new items and new things to do, not really that much in this update. And the limited time event is just a rehash of a previous limited time event. Aside from Joe's hint that something big is coming up in the future, I don't really know what's happening with Astroneer, to be honest with you. They've been kind of silent since the Nintendo Switch stuff had happened, and then they're kind of, running really low key. So I don't have a whole heck of a lot of news when it comes to what's coming out in Astroneer. At any rate, leave some comments in the comments section below. If you haven't already, hit that like button. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. Would love to have you in the community. If you want to follow me on any of my social media, you can find the links in the description below. And make sure to hit that notification bell. That way you know when I go live and when I post new videos. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.